It took just a little over 70 trucks and a few hundred protesters to bring the Canadian capital to a standstill. As days passed, the Freedom Convoy blockade in Ottawa opposing the vaccine mandates grew larger and has now inspired similar protests in other parts of the world. Several cities are witnessing such demonstrations, some even turning violent. The protests have become a rallying point against governments and public health measures. The Freedom Convoy is turning into a global movement.
We've heard from
A bus with Stop COVID Pass emblazoned on its side, a flag calling for peace, and a group of cars in a parking lot outside Brussels. The Freedom Convoy has marked its quiet entrance into Brussels, the home of the European Union. The latest stop for the movement against COVID-19 restrictions that started in Canada. In focus is the European Union's digital COVID-19 pass, a continent-wide digital pass that displays one's vaccination status. Belgium has been bracing for a convoy of protesters on Monday. The convoy started from France, was heading towards Brussels, where they planned the protest against the European Union's COVID-19 restrictions. However, Brussels has banned motorized protests, setting up checkpoints along Belgium's borders. In the city's European Union quarter, the mood was tense. This centre is home to most European Union institutions. Currently, there is heavy police presence, but protesters are yet to arrive here. The protest has not been authorized by the city authorities. Brussels has been encouraging commuters to avoid travelling by car. Meanwhile, the police have set up checkpoints on the main entrances to the city. Those who intend to protest have been asked to gather in the car park at the Hessel Exhibition Centre on the outskirts of the city. But only a few dozen cars and camper vans were there by mid-morning. Let's go straight across now to our correspondent Rosie Birchard with us from Brussels. Rosie, get us up to speed with the latest at this point.
Well, the idea was really a convergence of European convoys, so different protesters coming from elsewhere in Europe to try and come to Brussels and express their views. This does seem to be a movement that unites a broad church of people, but the overall goal really is to get rid of COVID-19 restrictions. Now, we're calling this a convoy, but we haven't seen lines of trucks Canadian style so far. What we have seen is a couple of hundred people on foot, and they're likely on foot because Brussels authorities have banned vehicle protests, and those that are on foot have been met with quite a heavy police presence. Police don't seem to be taking any risks here. You might see behind me there are quite a lot of police officers and some quite serious looking barricades. So far what we've seen has been peaceful. The movement says it intends to be peaceful, although we have heard from Brussels police that there were some weapons confiscated among other protesters in the city centre.
All right, and tell us more about the measures taken by the authorities at the city's European Union quarter, which is home to most of the European Union institutions.
Well, as you can see behind me, there's quite a heavy police presence. You might hear above me police helicopters. What could really work in police's favour here is some quite miserable weather we're having, so there's quite some heavy rain. The police say they have banned vehicle protests, but Brussels is no stranger to protests in general. Just a few weeks ago, there were 50,000 people on these streets here, and one of the European Union buildings behind me was smashed when protests turned violent. The idea today is that protests, at least from the movement side, should not turn violent, but it seems that police are taking no risk. You might be able to see right now around me more police officers are arriving. They are preparing for all eventualities.
Indeed, in talking about the demands that have been made and what the protesters have been saying all along.
So, well, these demands are pretty general. It's getting rid of COVID-19 restrictions and vaccine passes. Now, of course, what might be said is that these demands here, particularly in the European capital, in Brussels, might be falling on deaf ears. And the real reason for that is that much of these policies on vaccine passes, on closing hours and other kind of restrictions of public life are not set in Brussels. They're really set in national capitals. So we'll have to see what this moves forward to. But overall, this just does seem to be the latest expression of a decreasing public appetite for restrictions on life here in Europe as a kind of new phase of managing COVID-19 pandemic seems to begin.
Rosie Pritchard with us from Brussels. Thanks very much. We're leaving it there for the moment. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.